Now we are at another superhero that used to be taken seriously.
Those were up, and they did.
More smarts, and my...
He told me enough!
No, I.
Here's Chuck!
Hey everyone, it's Don J. Corleone here, and I'm here with a brand new movie review, and this movie review is going to be for the fourth MCU film, and it's the very first one to feature one of the a main character that is not from planet Earth, for once, and venture out more into different, more space worlds. And our first planet being Asgard. And this film is going to be for none other than 2011's Thor, the first installment of Thor's standalone franchise. And, yeah, so anyway. What's going to be the plot for this one? Well, the warrior Thor, played by Chris Hemsworth, is cast out of the fantastic realm of Asgard by his father Odin, played by Sir Anthony Hopkins, for his arrogance and sent to Earth to live amongst humans, falling in love with scientist Jane Foster, who teaches Thor much-needed lessons, and his newfound strength comes into play as the villain from his homeland sends dark forces towards Earth. So how is this made? Well, Sam Raimi originally envisioned the idea for Thor after making Darkman. Then he met Thor co-creator Stan Lee and pitched his concept for 20th Century Fox. They did not understand it. Thor was abandoned until April 1997, when Marvel Studios was beginning to expand rapidly. The film gained momentum after the success of X-Men in 2000, and the plan was for Thor to be made for television. UPN was in talks for airing it. Excited by the prospect, they pushed for a script and approached Tyler Mane to play Thor. Then in May 2000, Marvel Studios bought Artisan Entertainment to help finance it as a film. But by June 2004, the project still had yet to be personalized by a studio because Artisan shut down around that time. Sony Pictures Entertainment finally purchased the film rights. In December 2004, David S. Goyer was in negotiations to write and direct. By 2005, though, there were talks between Goyer and Marvel, and Goyer was no longer interested, though at this point the film was still set to be distributed through Sony Pictures. Sam Raimi did not end up directing it because he went on to direct Spider-Man instead. Mark Protostevich, a fan of the Thor comic book, agreed to write the script in April 2006, and the project moved to Paramount Pictures after it acquired the rights from Sony. That year, the film was announced to be a Marvel Studios production. In December 2007, Protostovich described his plans for it to be like a superhero origin story, but not one about a human gaining superpowers, but of a god realizing his true potential. It's a story of an Old Testament guy who becomes a New Testament god, according to his statement. In August 2007, Marvel Studios signed Matthew Vaughn to direct the film. Vaughn then rewrote Protostov's script in order to bring down the budget to $150 million, as Protostov's first draft would have cost $300 million to produce. After the success of Iron Man, Marvel Studios announced that they intended to release Thor on June 2010, with Iron Man 2 being used to introduce the character of Thor. Then Vaughn was released when his holding deal expired in May 2008, at which point Marvel had processed to work on a new draft and begin searching for a new director. Guillermo del Toro even entered talks to direct the film. Del Toro is a fan of Jack Kirby's work on the comics and said that he loved the character of Loki, but wished to incorporate more of the original Norse mythology into the film, including a really dingy Valhalla, Vikings, and mud. However, Del Toro ultimately turned down Thor to direct The Hobbit, and by September 2008, DJ Caruso had been discussing talking on the project, though did not read the script. Later that month, Kenneth Branagh entered negotiations to direct, and by December 2008, Branagh confirmed that he had been hired. It was going to be described as a human story right in the center of a big epic scenario. Branagh stated he hoped to begin filming in January 2010, and Marvel Studios went back to the release date of the film from its scheduled July 2010 release date to June 2011, almost a full year later, but then they later moved it to May 20, 2011 to distance the film's release from that of Captain America: The First Avenger, another Marvel Studios film that was scheduled to be released on July 22, 2011, and will be the next MCU review. In October 2008, Daniel Craig was offered to direct the role, but ultimately turned it down, citing his commitments to the James Bond franchise. So after the film was shot and marketed, Thor premiered in Sydney on April 17, 2011, and was released in the United States on May 6, 2011, as part of Phase 1 of the MCU. As for the critic reactions, he received generally positive reviews from critics, much better reactions than some of the previous MCU stuff like Incredible Hulk and Iron Man 2, and was a financial success, not as much as Iron Man 2, earning about $449 million worldwide. 3 sequels have been released, which in 2013, Thor the Dark World, Phase 2, Thor Ragnarok, Phase 3, and Thor Crap and Crapper, 2022. This last year. As for my reaction, I gotta say, this was actually one of the most decent MCU films, and it's my second favorite Thor film. It has some ups and downs, but I still think it's a pretty good flick. I had never heard of Thor before seeing this, except for other than like the direct-to-DVD animated Ultimate Avengers movies from Lionsgate, so I had no idea what to expect when I went and saw this in theaters on its second weekend of release. The storyline's very well done. I love how they show Asgard and explain how everything fits into place. The humor is very tasteful, mixed with a good amount of action. The only thing that could have used some improving was the way they filmed the film. The shaky camera and weird angles are a little annoying, but the rest of the film makes up for this. Some very good choices in the cast, and could not have picked a better actor for Thor or Loki. Natalie Portman's part isn't really the best at times. She has some cheesy lines, and her acting doesn't really flow right, even though she is a talented actress. She generally does better with serious parts instead of light and comical parts. Despite a somewhat information-laden opening, the backstory of Thor and the family dynamic between his father Odin and jealous brother Loki is fantastically realized, and a beautifully architected Asgard. Stimulously seeming archaic and futuristic, Asgard perfectly fits the film's ideology that magic and science are one of the same, something that would pretty much translate perfectly as the Marvel films would start to more deeply explore the otherworldly nature of the Marvel Universe as they progressed. The marketing boys did a very grand job of not letting on just how much of the film is set there, and the production team created a breathtaking realm throughout a combination of CGI, outlandish sets, and costumes even. And the film is at its best when the father-son triangle relationship is being explored, with Hemsworth, Hiddleston, and Hopkins all give very different but equally as impressive performances. Hemsworth's physical, fun-loving, but fiery-tempered Thor gives the film its heart, particularly during his tenure on Earth, while his jealous and manipulative brother Loki is given layers of depth and by Hiddleston, who has created perhaps the most memorable on-screen Marvel villain yet, and easily one of the most hilarious Marvel villains, who he would go on to become. And then it's Anthony Hopkins as Odin who steals every scene he's in. Despite his lack of knowledge of the source material, he applies himself to the role using every ounce of his Shakespearean nature and overpowers louder performances with a whisper. Much of the supporting cast is never given much time to shine, with Natalie Portman's role being particularly underdeveloped, while Sif and the Warriors 3 are entertaining if not particularly memorable, though. The Thor's friends don't really have much of a role in this movie, so I don't really say much about them. They don't really do much. And while it did sag in the middle and could have used a tad bit more action, I found the movie to be enjoyable from start to finish. I really love seeing Thor getting his ego battered as a mortal on Earth, which is something that could have been worthy of a movie all on its own. And when I heard the magical element of the mythology being explained away on science fiction, didn't really seem to like the sound of it, but I thought the movie did an excellent job on this. I honestly love the idea of magic as science and science as magic. While the movie's time spent in the fantasy realms had an extremely stylish plus and cheesy quality that made it seem like a live-action animated Disney epic, one of the classic and great animated Disney epics at that, I was giddy as could be watching it play out, and loved how it contrasted with the earthly setting. And about Loki, once again, he's a very awesome villain. Like, the guy's one slick, smooth, operating fiend, uneven sympathetic enough to be understandable, yet despicable enough to boo for. Like, he was probably my favorite character of this movie. And it pretty much shows that, and this film even pretty much shows that it was pretty much setting up who the villain of the big crossover that would happen the year after this was going to be. And surprisingly, Branagh demonstrates a deft touch in filming the action scenes too. The set pieces all featuring Thor vary from a bone-crunching intergalactic battle against the ogreish frost giants, a rough and gritty number with the human shield agents, We have a sharpshooter on their side for Marvel fans will recognize, and a showdown for the streets of New Mexico against an unstoppable alien robot, and the anticlimactic encounter on Asgard and his brother Loki. The final clash aside, which is kind of a letdown. The action is tough, exciting, and shot with flair. The CGI is mostly well done, and some of the visuals they're creating are stunning, although extreme wide shots which try to integrate people suffer from a glitchy effect which makes it look noticeably fake. And thankfully the 3 has been utilized carefully by Brenoff and it never distracts, but it doesn't really add to the proceedings either and probably could have been omitted. This story is pretty much straightforward. Thor has done a battle which he ruined because of his puffiness, and so he has been banished on Earth. His hammer has been put out some construction yard or something, and he's no longer worthy enough to lift it. It seems a lot like a copy of the first Assassin's Creed game, since there was apparently also Altar was the one who was stripped and he was sent back to beginner's ranks. And then Loki found out he belonged to the enemy demon race, and Ona has adopted him after killing his father. Then Loki teams up with those demons to attack Asgard. The CGI, I'll admit, is also pretty good. Like, every time I see the Asgard road, I always feel like it kind of feels... I would kind of gladly drive a sports car in it. It's like... However, I mean, the humans were a little boring, as they usually just were talking, and more talking. There wasn't something that one expect from MCU. That's pretty obvious since MCU wasn't even decided until this point. Even, like, we didn't really fully realize it until this movie really started to kind of further build up to it. But there still should have been a good tone. Like, the twist in the end where Loki decided to save Odin and kill the monster after the monster mentioned Loki helped him was pretty good, and I kind of always wanted the villain to do this. Like, don't leave yourself vulnerable after being exposed. Try to defend yourself and show that the person is lying. After Loki lost the battle, he pretended to commit suicide in order to show that he only wanted what he believed was justice. However, is there bad qualities with this movie? Yeah, I'll admit, there are some bad qualities. Like, my first bad quality is Kat Dennings. I forget her character's name, but I don't give a fuck. Her character is probably one of the worst comic reliefs in the world. Like, I just cannot sit through her character in these Thor movies. She just annoys me in every scene of these 2 films. Like, every single scene she attempts some stupid comedy. Like, when S.H.I.E.L.D. seizes Jane, Eric, and her character's equipment, all Kat Dennings' character is doing is ranting about an iPod they took. It's the only part of the equipment she's upset about. And she won't stop bragging about it throughout the whole entire scene, where they're moping over their equipment. All she's thinking about is the song she downloaded and her stupid iPod. However, she's not nearly as annoying here in the Dark World, which I find her way worse in. Yeah, but also, the character of Thor is likable, but he does start off as kind of a prick in this movie. But it is all part of his character development, because on Earth he finally learns to think about others, and he kind of does that heroic sacrifice where he's like willing to get himself shot by the giant robot that's crushed, destroying that whole entire town. And this act of selflessness actually gets his powers restored. So I really like he goes through a lot of character development here, and he kind of realizes his arrogance when he's unable to lift his hammer out of the mud, when he raids that shield base to retrieve it, and he realizes he's really lost his power for good, and he just screams out in despair. Really love those moments here, and I really like how we kind of see like Thor trying to figure out who he really is. And here it's a perfect start off for the character here. Like, and I'm going to be honest here, guys, I miss this Thor. This is the Thor I like seeing. Like, now don't get me wrong, guys. His comedic self did work in Ragnarok. I'll admit that, because at least in Ragnarok he still had serious moments. Like, he wasn't overly... Yeah, he got a little too goofy in Ragnarok, but there was times he still had seriousness. He was only goofy when he needed to be. The goofy moments only happened during the non-serious stuff. Like, at least Ragnarok still tried to be serious at times, but... I guess some people would criticize he feels a little too boring, but Thor was never supposed to be a humorous character. I kind of like they tried that these first two films, first two Avengers films and these two films, try to make him serious. Here. In Infinity War, even Infinity War, he was still serious. Like, Infinity War actually kind of ditched his Ragnarok comedy there. And he was probably the most badass in that film. It was around the 5 years later stuff in Endgame when they started to ruin him. Like, with how they portrayed Thor in Endgame, I get what they were going for. I can understand that, but I'd rather they don't try to. The problem with what they've was how he got portrayed in Endgame was they try to make it a joke, and I don't find alcohol depression funny at all. Like, it's actually some serious stuff, but I'm not gonna talk about more of this stuff. I'm gonna talk about my other last bad quality I have. My final bad quality is kind of Loki's defeat as well, because like basically here we know he's not dead. I mean, we know he's gonna come back in the Avengers. Like, the end credit scene even shows he's still alive, and like the end credit scene actually sets up the first Avengers movie where he's telling Selvig to look over the Tesseract because he's getting ready to brainwash him and like getting ready to invade the base. So yeah, I do also like that, and kind of like the Avengers even starts off where this post-credit scene left off. And Hawkeye also does appear, but it's really just a one-scene cameo during Thor's raid on the base, and that's it. Like, I wish we kind of saw a little more of Hawkeye. But despite those bad qualities, Thor is still another enjoyable MCU film that has aged better as the years progressed, and I'd still rather see the story instead of that ruined fat drunk parody version the Russos and Kevin Feige made in Endgame. And also caused because the fans thought that this Thor is too boring. He's supposed to be? Like, do you guys not read comics? Clearly. Anyway, I would definitely recommend this to Thor fans who want to see the good Thor, but also to stream it in case they want to lower their expectations. Anyways, that's it for my view of Thor. If you're wondering how I'm going to rank Thor, here's how I'm going to rank this movie. So overall, if you love the character of Thor and want to see S.H.I.E.L.D. shine a bit more, then I would easily recommend streaming this movie online to keep your expectations lowered once again. And if you're wondering how I'm going to rank Thor, I'm going to give Thor a 7 out of 10. There we go. That wraps up my review for Thor. And now we're on to 2 more films left in Phase 1. And that's going to be, well, the next one is going to be for who was my favorite Avenger of all time before I lost respect for the actor last year, once we showed who he really was. So, this review is probably going to be a little hard. I'm going to have to try not to mention this guy's name in the next one. And yeah, guys, Cap vs. Avenger is next, so well, it's going to be a little bit difficult not mentioning the actor's name. But anyway, guys, that will be it for this review. Thank you all for watching. If you like this and want to see more, and don't forget to like and subscribe to Don G. Corleone.